Hi, everyone. Welcome to this special presentation by Allied Legal on selling and pitching for startups. Thank you for being here. I know that many of you around the country are free to go about now, except us in Victoria. Thank you for coming to yet another Zoom presentation. So my name is Atula Bogada. I'm the lead organizer of Melbourne Silicon Beach and a few Silicon Beaches around the country. So just type in chat where you're from and your LinkedIn details so that we can connect afterwards. We have a Slack channel as well. I'll put those details up there shortly. For those of you who are watching on the recording, those links will be there in the YouTube description. So first of all, I like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of all the lands that we are participating in this meeting from. I'm in Melbourne, which is the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge all the past leaders, past, present, and emerging from indigenous nations around the country. As we talk about innovation and coming out of this crisis, pandemic, and everything, we have a lot to learn from indigenous leaders who lived on this land for 60,000 years. And at Silicon Beach, we are determined to do that as we innovate and go forward, empowering our founders. At Silicon Beach, we have this big, hairy, audacious goal of propelling Australia to #2 startup nation in the world. We were #5 last year. This year, we have slipped down to #7. So we are going in the opposite direction. But our mission is empowering founders and making sure that we do move upwards on that. You can check those rankings at startupblink.com. And we are now open for sponsorships. A lot of you think that Silicon Beach is funded by the government, state or federal. No, it's not. It is funded by sponsors. It's funded by the community. So we are founded by founders for founders and the small businesses and medium businesses that are supporting startups. Allied Legal is one of those service providers that are supporting us, sponsoring us. So they are valued sponsors. Please give your business to them as well. And there are other sponsors who are supporting us. I'll put those details on chat. Without further ado, I'll hand over to talk to you about Allied Legal, and then he'll hand over to Inder for the presentation. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Atula, and thanks everybody for coming and attending today. First of all, I would like to thank Atula and the folks over at Silicon Beach. You guys do such important work for Australia's startup scene. We really love hosting these webinars with you guys, and we're very glad to be Silicon Beach sponsors. So today we are going to be talking about the business development steps of selling and pitching and how these pertain to startups. Speaking today will be one of our directors, Inder Singh. Inder, give us a wave. Who has a lifetime of valuable experience in sales, growth, and business development. For the last 10 years, Inder has worked in the startup space and is bringing some of his insights in selling and pitching to you all today. So business development, or BD, is a highly important but often misunderstood aspect of startups and all businesses. It encompasses the capacity for a startup to get its business going, to sell its product or its service, market itself for potential investors, and achieve the long-term goal of transforming itself into a scalable business. And selling and pitching are essential aspects of that process. So a lot of people, we find, misunderstand the process required for selling and think it's really just a matter of being able to charismatically convince someone into buying your product or paying for your service. The reality is that it's a very practical, process-driven exercise which requires a thorough understanding of who you're communicating with, what their needs are, and what you're offering. Remember, if you can communicate your product, you can sell it. So with that, I'm going to pass you guys on to Inder. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat box and we'll try to get to all of them during the Q&A in the last 15 minutes of the webinar. I have also put our LinkedIn and our emails in the chat box if you want to reach out to us after the webinar, which I highly encourage you all to do. So Inder, take it away.
Great, thanks, Tal. I'm just going to share my screen here first. Make sure it's showing up.
Yeah, we can see that.
And is it in slideshow mode?
No, it's not. You have to go into slideshow mode.
Try that. How's that up?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Good afternoon. As Tolt mentioned, my name's Inder. What I thought I'd do is spend some time talking a little bit about kind of the world of sales. And this is really based on some of the feedback that we got from some of the last sessions. So I will be going through, a little bit of theory, and I'll try to leave a little bit in there as well in terms of some of the practical things you can also do around selling. But the intent here is not to turn you into a salesperson right out of the gates here. All right. My background is, as Tolt mentioned, is working in the corporate sector and in sales for a long time. I think, Tolt, you said a lifetime, right? Which is like 30 years. So, so 10 years of that was on the Canadian side, 10 years was on the US side, and 10 years was in Asia Pacific, about 5 of that within Australia. Most of my career has been building sales teams and also selling. And I also mentioned to you as well, I kind of left the corporate world probably about 3 years ago, entered into the entrepreneurial world. And I actually took a coding course to kind of get involved in this entrepreneurial innovation world. And one of the reasons why I took the coding course was really so I can kind of vet some of the ideas that I had in my head technically. It was also to start working a bit more closely within the ecosystem and also being able to work with software developers as well. So my background, has been technical, went through the kind of the sales part, but then also I've kind of come back around in the loop to kind of go technical again, but also broaden my skills from a sales level, right? After the coding course that I had, the other thing I kind of went through in my journey here was I got into an accelerator in Sydney, and I was in there with about 40 other founders. And one of the things that I kind of realized being in that, and by the way, the idea that I had was a property tech idea that kind of took care of all the moving parts. And being as part of that cohort, one of the things that I kind of recognized was that I wanted to kind of spend more of my time with a challenge that I found that kind of existed, and that was technical founders and those that didn't have a background in sales trying to get into the door with their first customers. And this was also some feedback, Tula, you gave last time as well, which was within Silicon Beach. What you're also seeing as well is there's a number of founders that in some cases need help with getting those first meetings. It tends to be more idea and early stage. So if I can kind of, spend a bit of time on that audience, that would be important, right? The other thing that I've also spent my career on as well is working in a lot of different verticals. So I've worked within, the small medium business segment. I've worked within the enterprise and also within the channels, right? Or working with business partners. I'll also share with you that, Rahul and myself, who's also on the webinar here as well as co-director for Allied Legal, we joined forces just before the pandemic. And this was probably about early March, so just before the restrictions started taking place. And Rahul and myself we're kind of working together for the last 10 months, really in an informal fashion. We kind of formed a company in March. Informally, when we were working together, one of the things we realized was when we were going to market together from a legal perspective and also business development, that this was very important for founders in terms of establishing themselves, but also going through some form of expansion. And then when we brought Tolt on board, and then when the restrictions kind of took place, it was time for us to kind of say, okay, we've been in the office, but it's time to kind of move off site into our houses as well with the restrictions that are being in place. And I actually ended up moving house as well when that was taking place. And I'll share a bit of a story with you as well. Let's see if I can go into the next slide. So I actually ended up moving house while this pandemic was going on. And while we're moving house, I still had a broadband connection in my previous residence that I was at. And one of the things that I needed to do was get a new connection because it was really hard to kind of work from home without having connection in the new house and having to come into the office with all the restrictions that were being in place. And so what ended up happening was once I got the new connection all working, I then needed to kind of cancel the old connection. And I actually called up, one of the telecom providers that I was with, and I will tell you, it became a nightmare of a process in terms of being able to get that disconnection time taking place. Trust me, there'll be an end to the story as well, right? And one of the challenges that kind of took place with that connection was I had essentially called them up and was on hold for almost 90 minutes because their contact center that was responsible for selling, but also for taking customer service calls as well, had restrictions in place and was actually out of country. What that essentially meant was it was very hard to kind of get through to people, right? And so I was on hold for almost 90 minutes. And I will share with you that I probably went through at least 10 different people that kept on saying, if you want to cancel that service, we can't do it. You have to contact the cancel team. I even tried going on to a chat, and that chat became very frustrating as well, because a lot of times what they were saying was call the contact center, who wasn't taking calls. This became a nightmare of a scenario. Ultimately, I said to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to, when I press the options and trying building your customer support, I'm not going to try the sales team. What I ended up doing was actually calling up the sales team. And I actually got hold of this one person, and he says, Mr. Singh, and I, by the way, told him I was really frustrated. That's me kind of yelling into the phone, right? And I was really very, very frustrated. Where the point was, I actually was yelling and saying, I just need to find somebody who can cancel my service, because I know this can go on for a long time. If somebody can't do this, I was going to end up paying this bill. And so this one person who was responsible for mobile sales answered the phone. He told me he's responsible for mobile sales, but what he told me as well was, Mr. Singh, I understand you want to cancel your service. It's not something that I'm responsible for, but I will help you, right? And then he started moving into a different mode, right? He said, what plan are you on right now on your mobile phone? I go, Jeff, right? And I've changed his name. I go, Jeff, all I really want to do is just cancel my service, right? I don't want another plan. And he essentially then goes, Mr. Singh, I fully understand that, and I will help you with that. But let me just ask you, what plan are you on right now? And I went through the whole process with him. And essentially what he said was, Mr. Singh, if I can show you, right, that I can save you dollars on the current plan you're on right now, right, is that something you'd be interested in? Right? I was getting even more furious now, because here's somebody trying to sell me something, right? And all I want to do is cancel my service. Look, the call kept on going on and on and on. He then kind of asked me as well. He goes, Mr. Singh, your accent, where are you from? And he goes, are you Canadian? And I go, yes. And he says, I spent a number of months in Winnipeg. And he also said, what hockey team do you support, right? And I was the Toronto Maple Leafs. And that was one of his teams as well. He was very much into hockey as well. So here he was, I'm frustrated, right? And he's having this conversation with me. But what was happening at that point in time was I was starting to become a lot more calmer. And he was starting to get to me as well. And I was starting to listen to what he was saying as well, right? And so with that, right, what I will share, there's one thing that he did as part of this, right? And the one thing he did is something called the Assumptive Close, right? As part of the sales process. He essentially said, if I can show you, will you, and how does that sound? And I will tell you that one of the things he was doing as part of this sales process was he was starting to qualify me, right? He was starting to see if I might be interested in the service that he had, even though I was really upset, even though I wanted to cancel my service, right? I will mention that this is a sales technique, right? That is used, and you have to be careful because this can become pushy sometimes as well, right? But one of the things he did do was he was somebody that was trying to be authentic, right? And he was actually spending some time to also be empathetic, and also in some cases actually said, Mr. Singh, I understand if the call drops, right? I've got your number, I'll call you back, recognizing I don't want to be on hold for another 90 minutes. And so with that comes the overall kind of sales cycle, which I just want to take a moment to kind of walk you through, right? So, when you're selling in the B2B space, this can be a 6 months to a 1 year process. Yes, in this case, it was an inbound call. I was calling in and it was B2C. But there's a few things that are common when you come down to a sales process. And really what I'm trying to do over here is kind of bring some visibility, right, to the invisible. Because many times you may be in a sales process yourself. You may actually go to you may be purchasing a house, you may be purchasing a car, and many times you are in fact in some form of a sales process. And there is a science and an art to this as well, with various steps and techniques as you go kind of through the circle, right? Even if you're looking for a job or you're job hunting, you actually may go through a very similar process as well, right? And there was a few things that he was doing, which was very important, right? And especially in this world that we're in right now, which is, it's not face-to-face, right? Where it can be in terms of in person, and it tends to be over video. In this case, my call that I was happening was kind of over the phone, right? And so the reason why I'm kind of sharing this with you is that many times you actually are going through this kind of a process. And there is a process that you go through in actually selling and the techniques that are involved. And one thing that is common that takes place through this is two things called establish rapport and building credibility, because you purchase from those that you trust. And if you just start pitching right away without establishing rapport or building some form of credibility in there, then a lot of times there may be some trust that's missing there. And a lot of times there isn't a common ground for you to kind of connect with the individual. So really what I'm saying here is, even in this new world that we're in, that there is, in terms of being able to connect with people, it's very important to build that rapport and also build kind of credibility as well, right? The other thing he did, by the way, I mentioned here as well, is the assumptive close. The assumptive close in the overall kind of sales cycle is important because it in some cases, it kind of puts you into a spot and helps the client understand better if they're committed in terms of going through some of the next steps here as well. Because this can become a numbers game in terms of the reach outs that you do, the amount of time you're spending in prospecting and researching. So if I just step back for a moment and look at the wheel overall, you'll kind of see that in this case, there's 8 stages. And the sales cycles that exist in different ways, in different companies, in different organizations, and also in with different founders. You may actually start kind of building your own kind of sales cycle of what's important to you and how you're operating based on what you're offering. So in this case, essentially what you're doing is you're going through prospecting, going through a period of where you're researching the client, doing some reach outs, connecting with them, having those meetings, right? There'll be some steps you do around the assumptive close based on what happens next. Will you be doing a demo? Will there be a proposal? If you're purchasing cars, that presentation may in fact be a test drive. Along the way, you also may be getting objections, right? When I was dealing with Jeff here at a telecom provider, I was getting objections constantly, but he was addressing all those objections, which ultimately leads, as part of the circle, to closing the sale, delivering, right, what you have to offer, and asking for referrals, and the cycle kind of goes back again. And also, so that kind of just at a high level kind of goes through the sales cycle. There is a science to the process of selling, right? Now, I'll also share with you that when many people who want to grow up don't grow up in saying, I want to be a salesperson, right? I didn't get a math degree to kind of saying, I want to be in sales when I grow up, right? And as you're kind of doing that, there is an evolution that's also taken place that has taken place in sales over the last 30 years as well, right? And that evolution has been from essentially from relationship selling to solution selling to now where we are around digital selling and using social media and marketing in this space as well. And as a founder, and you are getting involved in selling and pitching, like it or not, right? There's going to be investors that you'll be possibly pitching and selling to. There may be co-founders that you want to bring onto the team. There may be a board that you're starting to form, and you're trying to entice them to come on your advisory team. There may be channel partners that are part of your ecosystem that you need to start reaching out to, because you realize that trying to go one client at a time may take time. There's some channel partners out there that align to you. So even as you're going through this process, the circle becomes important. The other thing as a founder is that there are a number of different sales roles that exist. All of sales is not just one role where you're the salesperson, right? There is field sales and there is inside sales, right? There is direct sales where you're dealing directly with customers, and there's indirect sales where you're dealing with business partners. And then when you look at yourself as a startup and looking to see the market that exists out there as well, you may be saying to yourself, well, I want to crack into the education sector, or maybe there's a specific vertical around finance, right? Or maybe it's healthcare. So there may be strategic accounts that are within that and major accounts. There may be specific services that you're offering as well. As a founder, right, large companies have very specialized roles that exist from a sales level. As a founder, you essentially are now playing all of these roles. And not only are you playing all of these roles, but in some cases, you're also now the sales manager. Not only are you actually trying to get the sale, but you're also stepping back a little bit and looking at the overall sales process that you're executing, forming it, developing it, and then actually seeing if it's actually working as well and retweaking it where you have to also. In some cases, you may then go through a process where you're then starting to hire people. And as you're hiring, you may start looking to see, there's different types of salespeople that exist out there. You may want to start seeing what might be the right fit for you based on your strengths and based on what you're trying to go to the market with. The other thing happening as well, and by the way, this is a really good book. It's called The Third Wave. It kind of goes through the three waves that innovation that has been taking place, over the decades, right from kind of building the internet to the app economy to the internet of everything. I'll probably even offer that there's probably now a fourth wave, right, that's coming in place now with everything happening now in the new normal. But I'll just read this out to you for a moment, right? But the entrepreneurs of this era are going to challenge the biggest industries in the world and those that most affect our daily lives. They will reimagine our healthcare system and retool our education system. They will create products and services that make our food safer and our commute to work easier, right? So this is amazing. It's amazing what all of you are doing and what our founders, locally and globally are doing around the world in terms of driving innovation. What I offer to you is to change the world, it's going to start with getting meetings, right? And it's going to start with kind of going through that circle in terms of doing the prospecting, in terms of doing the research, right? In terms of connecting and going through a process where you're reaching out to clients, because you cannot build this in a silo. So the next part of this is essentially going to be, and what I'm trying to put here is a bit of practical scenario. So in this case, what I put together is a little scenario here in terms of how to get your first sales meeting. So Tula, I think you mentioned last time, this is something that you thought, let's put this on paper and let's see if we can offer it up to the participants on the call today, right? So I'm going to kind of walk through and set up a bit of a scenario here in terms of how do you get your first sales meeting, and then how do you get your next sales meeting? What's that process you kind of go through? So I put a scenario together, and let's kind of read it out first, set it up, and we'll kind of walk through the steps together. If you've got questions through this, feel free to put it into the chat. I'll try to stop about 15 minutes past the hour, no matter where we are, just so we can start taking some questions that might be there as well. But in this case, Samantha is from Melbourne, right? She's been working as an HR professional in the corporate sector for 7 years across 3 different well-known companies. As an HR professional, she has worked in recruiting, top-tier talent, and performance management. Samantha continues to see inefficiencies in processes, which result in poor talent outcomes for the company. She has been coming up with ideas to solve, which she has shared with management, but they go no further. Recently, with the coronavirus, Samantha has been stood down and has decided that now is the time to take this giant leap. She shared her idea with a few colleagues who also want to work on it together to create an HR marketplace app that uses AI to mark skills for new positions. Samantha has been able to provide a basic MVP through bootstrapping, but struggling to get potential clients to validate and eventually get her first revenue-producing customer. So, question is, how does Samantha start selling? Where should she start? It's a big market. She's come up with this app that she has bootstrapped. She's focused on the HR kind of marketplace. and she's got a whole market that she can kind of go after. So let's kind of walk through some of the steps of what you can do. So the first thing here is, which I think is important, you obviously want to look at your team, right? And if you have a team, in this case, she's got a team, but even though she's got a team, you want to look at your skills and look to see, what type of skills you've got from a sales level. In some cases, just maybe there's some people that are you might be a people person. In some cases, you may have had some background of selling, and in that case, right, I think it's a good thing for those people to kind of get engaged to kind of help with getting into the door at certain accounts. But as a founder, I think it's important to also be making those sales calls yourself, right? Even as a technical founder. And one of the first places that you can start is actually with warm prospects. And what you can start doing is kind of drawing a circle, and the center would be the warm prospects, right? It could be those that you're closest to, those that there's some familiarity that you have, and you may want to reach out to them and start asking for some form of referrals, right? In some cases, they may have been previous customers of yours. In some cases, you may have been doing some validation along the way. And there's nothing wrong with kind of going back to them through this process to get those introductions. And if you are asking for referrals, what I'll say, and I think it's important, is to do something called a double opt-in. Sometimes when you ask for a referral, that person may actually not ask the person, and all of a sudden they send a cold email to that person who they know and introduce you without asking them about that. With a double opt-in process, what essentially you're doing is you're actually asking that person, and you're setting it up a little bit in terms of, I'm going to be introducing this person to you. And also what it does also for you is it provides a bit of more warmth and also some context. The other thing as you're going through this is to be specific about what you're asking for as well, what type of help and where you are in this. And what may help in this process is actually writing up a forwardable email. So in that email, actually write it up as though you're sending out almost cold yourself, right? Introducing yourself to that. That saves a person who's being introduced that some time in doing that, but also allows them to understand a little bit more about what you're offering and then forwards it over to make the connections. The other thing you have to be careful with when you are going through warm prospects, over a period of time, after you've kind of exhausted your own network and you've exhausted your referrals, right? There could be some network fatigue. So you also have to be careful with asking the same person or the same group of people over and over again for referrals, because that can take a toll as well, and you could start losing some friends in that process, right? The next part here is the cold prospects, right? And it's interesting again in terms of where we are with the new normal taking place, because you do have to be careful with reaching out, how you reach out, and who you reach out to as well. There has to be some sort of intent. There has to be some authenticity that exists here also, right? So you really got to do a bit of soul searching on yourself, right? But also starting to kind of put together a list about what you want to go after. And by the way, in this case, I'll also say is don't worry about the shiny toys. Don't worry about the CRM tools, right? Don't worry about the proposals and pricing because you don't have it in place right now. What you really need right now is a meeting, right? A meeting to start talking to somebody that could be a potential client, right? Somebody that can validate your problem or your solution if you've already done that, but somebody that can help you start getting to that product market fit, which is really important, right? Do not listen to silo. And by the way, once you get the meeting, you're going to start figuring out the next steps, right? Yes, there'll be a preparation process you have to go through in that, right? And that stuff, and those are things you'll work through, right, when the time comes. But the first part is put the effort in getting those meetings and make that a religious, right, activity that you do, daily, hourly, right, through this piece, right? You also want to start thinking about the pain points and challenges on the companies and the potential buyers that you're looking for. In this case, Samantha, right, 8 is in HR, right? There's a pain point that exists, right, today out in our marketplace, even everything that's happening right now. You look at the airlines, right? In some cases, many of the airlines, like they're standing down jobs as well. There's 6,000 people at Qantas that was in the news recently, right, where their jobs are being stood down as well. and there could be an opportunity somewhere in all of that for this skills matching app, right? It may not be with Qantas, but it may be with a healthcare provider, right? Like the Medibanks or the Bupas of the world, right? They may be having challenges and growth and growth challenges. And if you've got an app, right, that you're starting to build out that matches skills to that, right, and can speed up that process and doesn't look at experiences, but actually looks at the skills of somebody who's coming in that can fit them into a different industry, that may be appealing for somebody. So you want to start thinking about the angles that you're looking for as well and going through that. And then start kind of making a list, right, of sweet spot customers. These are your ideal customers. This is your minimal, viable audience, your MVA in this case, right, that you want to start approaching with this product or service or this offering, right? And then start putting a list of those names down in that process, and not just the names of the companies, but you want to get down to actually putting down names of contacts, right? And titles of people, right? And start doing some research on those titles and what that means. And the enterprise space, sometimes titles may not mean a lot. So you may have to go a little bit deeper in understanding what exactly is it they do. You may have to go out back to your warm network, right? And if there are people with similar titles there, reach out to your warm network to understand a little more about the challenges that they're having in that case, right? Because the things you learn from your network or that's warm, you can apply to your cold contacts too. Okay? And a couple of sources here, right? So yes, use LinkedIn, because getting contact information is going to be the next challenge, right? Now that you've got those names, now that you know those companies you want to kind of reach out to, well, now it's like, how do I reach out to them? I don't have their email address. How do I reach out to them if they aren't a connection on LinkedIn right now, right? And so there are other sources out there that you could use, right? Example, there is Hunter.io. There's a few other kind of websites that you can go to and some apps that can help you with getting potential contact names, right? But keep in mind, we're in prospect land, and we're doing cold things right now, right? But what we want to try to do is try to warm up as much as we can through that process, right? And by the way, sending email messages, right, and LinkedIn messages is not the only way of reaching out, right? There are other things you can look at doing as well, but this is one thing you want to start looking at and start doing, right? And you want to do this, as I mentioned, religiously over a period of weeks. We're starting to go through this process. It's also important to, again, be authentic and be you, right? You got to be careful with the pushiness factor here. You got to be careful with also being an imposter, right? You want to be authentic and you want to be you. And so as you're going through that, craft the messages to make it sound personal, and it should be personal. It should also be very relevant as you do this. There may also be a call to action in the message on how you'll be asking for this meeting, right? And then you also want to look at when you send it, right? Because in some cases you may send it on a Monday, right? And depending on people's habits, some people may look at messages or emails on a Monday, as you're going into the office. In some cases, Fridays are the days, there may be in their mind where they have some time parked to perhaps look at and work on some of their things around LinkedIn. You might even look at a weekend. There's some people, especially at the executive level, that actually do work on weekends and are constantly thinking about things and are open to new ideas and fresh ideas, perhaps while they're watching something, right? So think about the timing of when you do this. And if you go online, you'll probably see some things that say, it's better to send things on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday between noon to 2 as an example. With a new normal, some of these things, how people are working and their habits is starting to change. And I will tell you, there's probably more appetite for meetings now than there has been before. So now, right, what do you actually write in that email, right? And I will share with you, this is a technique, right? It is a technique. It's actually called Basho, right? So I'm not sure where the name came from, but I've learned this, and I've gone online and I've found some sources on this as well. You can do the same thing, but there is a technique, and it's called the Basho technique. You may have actually received emails using this technique. You may have received LinkedIn messages, right, from others that are looking to you or your companies to help them. And in some cases, you may have used this before as well. You have to, it starts off with, and it is, I'll just be known, it is a very specific technique, right? And you may personalize some of this for yourself based on the cultures you're trying to reach out to, and also based on the audience that you're going after, and also based on your comfort level and your own voice and your own style and the messaging that you're using, right? But it kind of starts off with it starts off with the first name. Some people say hey or hi, and that's fine, right? But in this specific technique, it actually starts off with the first name. And the reason why they use the first name in these techniques, it has to just do with a bit of power, right? When you actually just use their first name and not their last name, no dear, it's almost saying you're almost equivalent to them and you're just using their first name. And also when you write this email, it's also in a fashion that actually it can be read out loud. So you can actually use this and actually do a cold call to somebody, and in fact actually read this completely out loud. And it may sound strange, but you can actually call somebody up with an email like this as well, and actually use this almost verbatim, right? With a little bit of authenticity that's also you, based on your comfort level, right? And I will tell you that it takes time to write this up, right? In some cases, right, and I will tell you, it can take half a day, right? There's times where we have actually spent, right, with a group of people, half a day, right, to actually write up one of these emails, right, to a specific client in a specific industry, right, before even sending it. We will even go through the process, right, and I'll share with you, of actually sending it to ourselves first on a mobile phone to see how it reads, right? And then also look at the formatting. We'll also look at the subject line, right? In terms of what the subject looks like. And is the subject, you kind of look to yourself saying, will I open this? Will I not open this? Because a lot of times it may go to spam. So you have to be careful for that as well, right? But there's also some research involved before you even kind of craft this together. You actually have to spend some time going through and looking up that customer's industry, understanding the pain points, understanding how what you have may actually align to that specific customer, right? And that specific contact too, right? And you may even find a news article or on social media, something that that person that you're trying to reach out to has done, right? And that, right, is something that you can use as part of your basho email that you're writing out, right? In some cases, there may not be, right? And so you're going to have to kind of personalize that message about why and why is it irrelevant? Why me? Why now? Right? And kind of put that into the email, right? But so it starts with the first name, then goes, I read with interest in your article around the area, and I thought I would reach out to you. So this could be, for example, going to a BUPA, right? And maybe it's it's somebody with an HR at BUPA, for Samantha in this case, which is the case study we're kind of going through. And maybe there is an article that exists, right, that somebody within HR has kind of put together or been on social media and has been, maybe they've been on a recruiting mission, right? And then you can kind of go through and you have to kind of personalize it with your startup and your sentiments regarding, and kind of putting in your kind of specific own message, which makes it very personal. And maybe it's a personal based on the app that you have built and why you're kind of, and why that's important, and the challenge it's trying to solve for, right? And then you can kind of say, we are a startup, XYZ, that have helped clients with exactly that situation, right? Which is matching skills, right, to those that are looking for positions without looking at people's experiences, because of redundancy. So you can make it very specific, right? And then would it be possible to have a short discussion around your strategy and how potentially we could add value? What's the best way to dial your 30-minute meeting at your office, right? And in some cases, you can ask, who would be the best person to speak to? Now, if you put in who would be the best person to speak to, what's now happening is you're now telling that person that perhaps they aren't the right person to be able to speaking to, and perhaps they should actually, forward that email to somebody else. But in this case, if you're reaching out to that person, right, be bold and ask for the meeting, right? What they may say is, on their own, I'm not the right person, but I forwarded to this person to kind of reach back out to you, which, by the way, has taken place many times in emails that I have sent out too, right? I will share with you that some of these emails receive responses back within 10 minutes, right? In some cases, never, right? But it does actually, it is one technique, and it is a technique that has worked. But it's a technique you probably don't want to use on its own. It's a technique that you probably want to do other things along the way as well, as part of your overall kind of reach out campaign, in reaching out to your sweet spot, your audiences, and your contacts. So look, we're about 1/4 past the hour, right? So I'm just going to pause for a moment, right, to see if there might be any questions before I kind of continue on.
Thanks, Ender. We actually do have a question in the chat box from Dee. She asked if there are any insights as to why the B2B sales cycles are 6 to 12 months, and whether you have any insights on whether that can be fast tracked.
Ooh, wow. That's a really good question. And the average sales cycle, as I mentioned, is 6 to 12 months. I will share with you that, in some cases, if you are there at the right time and you hit the right person at the right time, and you've done that reach out and everything resonates and it's the right fit, this can happen pretty quickly. Things can move along relatively quickly, right? In some cases, it can be done, within 30 days, right? In some cases, within weeks, right? In some cases, though, just from an average, there is a process, and as you go through the whole circle of prospecting, research, and connecting, and if they're a cold prospect, right, that can take some time, right? And in large organizations and large companies, in some cases, will have account directors, right? They are responsible for the relationship within that account. In this case, you are just starting to form those relationships. So where there already are companies and organizations already established, and you have an account team and you're already selling into that account, it may be faster, right? And what you're also doing as well is you're building momentum, because you don't just have one lead, but you have multiple leads and you have multiple salespeople. When you're the sole person doing this and you're going after a cold prospect, right, that can take more time, and it can take 6 to 12 months. You also have to understand from the B2B in this case, and I had said B2B enterprise. In a small, medium business, right, yes, that would be faster. But in a large organization with thousands of people and various titles, right, and going through their systems, right, and their procurement process, that can take time, right? Not to mention that you still have to go through the process of understanding their specific challenge, their specific pain point, and does your solution actually help address that, right? And are they even willing to take a risk, right, with you based on other competitive offerings that might be in the marketplace, given that yours is new? Is it true? Is it tried, tested, and true, right? And so with all that, it could take time in a longer sales cycle. And is there ways to fast track that? There is, right? But one of them is using those warm referrals, right? The other one is really being very, very relevant in terms of what you have to offer, and doing that that research on that organization and that company, right? In some cases, like some of this will take time to kind of work through, and you have to kind of go through the process. And there are, by the way, other techniques you can use for this process where you can bypass certain things, right? As I mentioned, the assumptive close is one. In some cases, the assumptive close, if you do use that, right, and use it early on, in some cases, you may not be wasting your time through a long process, right? But again, it's trying to get those meetings, you can actually use the assumptive close, which could take time. So a bit of a long, winded answer, but I hope that helps to address some of the finesse, right, and the challenges with sales and selling.
Ender, so far that's the only question we've had in the chat box. Look, if anybody else wants to ask questions, this is the time to do that. So please go ahead and put it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask out loud. Ender, did you want to keep working through the remainder of the presentation while we're waiting on some more questions?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So I'll kind of share a few more things here too. So we kind of walked a little bit through, prospecting, researching, connecting, reaching out, right? I have not gone through addressing objections and presenting, but I shared a little bit about my experience with one of the telecoms and my objections that I had. But then there's also closing the sale, right? And as you may be a new startup, right? You may be a new founder, right? You may be getting those first meetings, and you are going through the sales cycle. You have those meetings already. You've done some of the assumptive close. You've gone through the demos, right? And the customer's saying, yeah, I'm interested. I want to actually try this out. I'm not sure if I'm prepared right now to actually, get this for my entire organization right now, but it's something we can do either in a specific, geography, right? Or maybe a specific team, and kind of plant this first and let's see how it goes, right? And that's where you kind of get into a trial and a pilot, right? And the reason why this is important, especially as part of your first sales or your, right, is to start building up that case study, to start building up those references so the next sale, right, will hopefully be easier, right? And not take the 6 to 12 months, because now you actually have something that you've actually been putting into a live environment, right? And through that process, you're also going to go through kind of, you know, the agreements, right? And also there may be some T's and C's and IP that have to be negotiated through the process. So those may be things that you ask for, right? Say, you know, if we do this pilot, right, you know, will you agree to be a reference, right? You're doing an assumptive close, and you're asking for things along the way, because that's very important to you as well, right? And, you know, I'll even ask kind of Talt and Rahul, who are kind of on the call too, right? Just from a legal perspective, are there things that you see at this stage, right, where you know there may be value that you can also add to from your side?
Sure. Yeah. So look, in terms of the pilot piece, I guess firstly, why are you doing that? I think needs to be discussed. So the whole idea here is to validate your product or service, or anything that might be special about it. And so you might be engaging into a pilot program with the university by way of example, or a key player within the industry that you're targeting. It could be a client. So you might be struggling to sell you know, at this stage, because you're an early stage startup, but you might want to enter into a pilot with a strategic client partner to see if you can add value to their organization. I guess from a legal perspective, the things to think about there are, it is a commercial arrangement, and what you want to make sure is that any intellectual property that you have developed is secure as part of you entering into the pilot program. So that there would normally be in the agreement that you enter into, there would normally be clear provisions in relation to the fact that you retain any IP that has been created, and there's the concept of background IP that both parties bring to a pilot program. Both parties will want to retain that. There's always heavy negotiation around what happens to any improvements that are made to the intellectual property, who owns that. So obviously that's something that that lawyers are able to assist with. And then there's also from your side, once you've gone through a pilot and the results that are that come out of it, I guess you want to be able to utilize that, right? Whether it is in promoting your product or service, to say that, you know, X, Y, and Z company has run a pilot and it shows that your product has been able to produce certain results. You want to be able to use that in marketing and selling your whatever it is that you've developed. So all of this is articulated in an agreement, and it should be and time should be spent in terms of putting that together. The idea is for you as the startup and whoever the counterparty is, to have a collaborative approach to such arrangements.
That's great. Thanks for kind of sharing that. Right. So I'm going to step back for a moment, right, and sort of stare at the circle one more time, right, because it is a process that you go through, right, and it's important to say that this is a process, right. It's not just something you kind of trip upon. Right. And by the way, I'll say you will get rejections. You will get no's, right, as you go through this. To me, no's become a challenge, right? And rejections become a challenge as well, right? I've had clients, right, in the past where I've been trying to knock on a door for over a year, right? To the point where that person has now become a client, right, of ours, and in fact has given us more business, right? But knowing it's a process kind of makes that rejection a little bit different, because what it means is you can go on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And it's important, as you are founders, right, and you are kind of working through this process, that you do try to get those meetings and not do this in a silo, right? Whether you're trying to validate your problem, whether you're trying to validate your solution, whether you're working through product market fit, whether you're trying to get to your first customer, or whether you're trying to get to your next customer, or whether you're trying to go interstate or globally in different markets, right? Getting those meetings, right, is very important, right, to growing your business, right? when you signed up for this as a founder, right? You signed up for this is going to be your paycheck too, right? You've got to live, right? Your team has to also survive, and you also need the runway. And it's getting these meetings, right, that allow you to innovate and change the world. So everything starts with kind of getting a meeting. Right?
I'll add to that, Inder, if I can. Just by way of background, I am a lawyer at Allied Legal, and I work a lot in business development with Inder as well. And there's something which I find interesting that we do for our business development clients is we'll often send out a reach out email to which it is sort of difficult to say no, because we're not saying we want to sell you this product, we want you to hire us. We're saying we like what you do, our passions align with your passions, and we just love to have a conversation with you. And we've had great success in converting those conversations into sales for our BD clients. As you said, the crucial key there is getting that first meeting. And one way to do that, which we sometimes employ, is by saying that we just want to talk. We find what you do interesting and we'd love to talk more about it. Are you interested in meeting with us?
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that, Tal. And again, it comes down to being authentic, right? Like, do not be that pushy person, right? You have created something and you are innovating, right? Your idea, right? As an entrepreneur, and you're very passionate about that, right? You actually are there sincerely to help. So as you're going through that process, right, stay true to your values, and stay true to your values even when you're forming your business partners and your ecosystem and you're doing your reach outs, right? Because people are there to help. People are there to listen, and people have problems, right, that they need help solving, right? You just need to find that ideal customer, right, where there's a match, right, for what you have to kind of offer, right? And in the spirit of Talt, kind of at the very beginning, kind of giving the Kanye West quote, right? I came up with a Kanye West quote here as well, right? So Kanye West says here, right, and he is an entrepreneur, right? He is an innovator and a visionary, what you might think, right? In this case, right? But I'm on the pursuit of awesomeness, right? Excellence is the bare minimum, right? So as you are out there, right, in terms of being awesome, right, it does start, right, with kind of being authentic and kind of being yourself. But this is about excellence being the bare minimum, and spending time doing this. So that kind of concludes with about 3 minutes left.
That's great timing, Inder. Thanks. It's a great presentation. I learned a lot. Yeah, I had a comment there. I put there, it's not so much a question, but it's about what if Samantha, this is in the case studies instance, Samantha runs an event like this, a webinar, to get people like interested in her app, and maybe can that be used as both as a, say, focus group as well as maybe as a sales funnel and people to refer her app to, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, right, I think there's a number of things you have to from a reach out perspective, right? And that, what we kind of walked through was the one-to-one, right? Where you're kind of reaching out one person at a time, one contact at a time. And that was really specifically around the enterprise space, right? Because there are some startups, there are some founders that are trying to get into some very, very big and heavy kind of corporate ASX, right? Accounts, right? Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 accounts, right? And in some cases, they're trying to do it locally and they're trying to do it globally too, right? And this is what you're talking about here is really it's the one to many, right? And in some cases, that could be the medium businesses, the small businesses, right? But also there could be a lot of corporates that show up in the one-to-many format as well, right? On some events and on some dials, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely. I think you also have to integrate kind of there's a marketing piece and there's a sales piece. The marketing piece also helps with kind of air cover and branding, right? And social media and that engine, right? But there's also the kind of the sales piece, which is actually to have those one-on-one kind of interactions. Right?
Okay.
Absolutely. So I would say webinars are a great, right?
Yeah.
One-to-many perhaps.
Yeah, I find that they're very engaging and people don't find it too hard to get to them. And so I think post-COVID, webinars will become a sales tool as well. Yeah, as long as you're not too salesy.
No, that's true. That's true. You know, when I first started in sales, I went through 6 months of kind of like sales training. They actually took us completely out of the field. We were not allowed to sell. We were in class, right, in a class environment for 6 months, going back and forth, right, and trying some of this stuff out. So even as you're doing this, I was saying, start selling and just start doing, right, through that process, and you will learn along the way as you kind of go through this, right?
Okay, great. Thanks, Inder. Jim is saying very good and very encouraging, so really worthwhile. So there's a lot of thank you things. So connect with, we can stay for another 5 minutes or so. If you have any questions, ask away. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. What I'll do is I will stop the recording there. So thanks to everyone watching on the recording as well. You have the contact details on the screen. So contact the Allied Legal Group. I'll stop the recording there. If anyone wants to ask a question that's off the record, this is the time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Inder, Rahul, and Ter. It's really good.
Good. Thank you, Shula. Thanks, everybody.